With this, you can ride those waves, focusing on staying relaxed and not building up too much tension in your body, keeping your mind relaxed as well, so that you can let the pleasure build and build and build into these altered states of powerful orgasmic experience. Hey guys, I'm Jonathan White. I'm here to help you master your sexual energy so you can manifest your ideal life. If you want to learn more about sexual mastery, make sure you subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon to stay notified when I release new videos and go live. Make sure you get my free ejaculation control course through the link in the video description below. Hey guys, in today's video, I'm going to break down the male non-ejaculatory orgasm in very great detail in a way I've never heard it presented before. And if I had heard this information when I was still learning how to do this, it would have cleared up a lot of confusion for me. You can use what I share in this video to experience much more pleasure right away and to start having non-ejaculatory orgasms. So male non-ejaculatory orgasm is something that is not terribly well known about, though it's becoming more of a trend, I will say. More and more people are talking about this, but from what I've seen, there's still a very large misunderstanding about how to actually do this, what a true non-ejaculatory orgasm is, and many other things. The most common thing you'll hear from people teaching about this is to have one of these. Basically, you hit the point of no return and you squeeze your pelvic floor muscles or mechanically block the seminal valve using the $1 million point to physically hold in the sperm while still having a non-ejaculatory orgasm. This is a very limited technique that still causes a refractory period. In my opinion, this is not a true non-ejaculatory orgasm, and that's not what I'm talking about. You're not going to get terribly far with that method. What I'm going to talk about is a more internal experience of orgasm, where that buildup that starts in the genitals spreads through the rest of the body, puts you into an altered state of deep sexual pleasure, intense orgasmic intensity, and even spiritual type of experiences. And it's very important for me to note right here that achieving this type of orgasm is not always a terribly linear process. It's not a, you do this and then you do that and you have this type of orgasm. And I will get more into this. It's also very important to understand that this type of orgasm does not necessarily correlate to the point of no return, the point at which you would ejaculate. So in this graph, we have two lines here, one representing arousal, one representing time. And the most common teaching about male non-ejaculatory orgasms is that, we'll say as your arousal over a period of time increases, this would be the typical male ejaculatory pattern. Your arousal increases, you hit the point of ejaculation, the pleasure increases a bit more, and it drops off, you're done. This is the typical male sexual response. The common experience for men is to only focus on increasing their arousal, increasing sexual pleasure until they hit the point of no return. They start ejaculating, the pleasure increases a little bit, and then they're done. It drops off because they cannot continue having sex. They cannot continue building arousal. And so now on the graph, I'm going to draw what is often attributed as being the male non-ejaculatory orgasm. So the arousal builds, it builds, and you reach that same point where you would ejaculate, and instead of continuing through the point of no return, you relax a bit, you pull the energy up, your arousal diminishes a bit, and then you keep going. And you can get to even higher thresholds of pleasure and arousal. And then, again, you hit a point where you might ejaculate, but instead you relax, you stop, you back off a bit, and you can continue so on, right? Now, overall, this is a true representation, but there's a few misunderstandings in this arousal over time. Number one being, what does arousal actually mean? Because when we look at a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the point of ejaculation, you cannot go any higher than a 10 in that model, because ejaculation function, what is really happening here is a buildup of tension. Once you start hitting about an 8 or a 9, the pelvic floor muscles start to tense up, building up into what eventually becomes prostate spasms. That is an ejaculation. You simply cannot continue to build tension beyond a 10 in that model. And that's what most people are referring to as arousal. But you can actually experience much more pleasure beyond that, what we would call a 10 level. Potentially unlimited levels of pleasure. So this model is a bit limited in our understanding of arousal over time and the male non-ejaculatory orgasm. What is the actual definition of arousal? One dictionary definition I found says, arousal is a state in which you feel excited or very alert. For example, as a result of fear, stress, anger, excitement. So this is pretty vague. What we're basically looking at here is an excitement response in the body, a nervous system response, and this is a tension response. It's well understood in Eastern medicine that excitement and stress affect the body in exactly the same way. They tend to cause tension. So arousal is a bit of a poor word to use in this context because we often attribute different ideas to what being aroused means. And part of arousal can actually be tension. So first of all, let's look at the scale as a tension scale, right? Because this is an important part of male sexual excitement. Male arousal is tension starts to build. And this is actually the opposite of what we want, to experience non-ejaculatory and full body orgasms. Because again, on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being your pelvic floor contracts so much, there's so much tension built up that the only possible next level is an ejaculation, which is a release of that tension. And this is also a reason why one of the most common causes of premature ejaculation is having excessive physical and mental tension, especially tension in the pelvic floor. You're already at an 8 or a 9 on the tension scale when you go to have sex. So this arousal scale becomes confusing to men who experience premature ejaculation because what they don't realize is they're basically already at a 7 or an 8, possibly all the time, even though they're not necessarily sexually aroused in the sense that we may think of. So this new model gives us a bit more clarity on what's happening here. Now, if we look at the scale as pleasure over time, there's absolutely no end to how much pleasure we can experience. The only factor to how much sexual pleasure and orgasm we could say you can experience is that amount of pleasure and orgasm you can experience without hitting, for most people, a 9 or a 10 on the tension scale. So what this means is that the biggest key to non-ejaculatory orgasm is to stay within what the traditional definition of the arousal scale would be at, I would say, around a 7, maybe an 8 if you really have some skill. Because in this state, especially when you're focused on keeping relaxed, you're breathing deeply, you're moving the sexual energy through your body, but most importantly here, we'll just say keeping the pelvic floor relaxed, because it's that contraction in the pelvic floor which builds up to an ejaculatory orgasm. If you never have a buildup of tension in the pelvic floor, you will not ejaculate. Pretty much, period. Though there may be some exceptions, right? So the whole key to getting into non-ejaculatory states of orgasm is to remain at, we'll say, a 7 on the tension scale, not necessarily the arousal scale, because you can feel very, very deeply aroused on unprecedented levels once you get to these higher levels of pleasure, but you can only make it to a 10 on the tension scale. But even tension scale isn't 100% accurate with it, because ideally we want to stay to 1. But I think the idea here is that having enough arousal and sexual excitement that you maintain an erection, you maintain sexual excitement and that charged feeling of sexual energy. If you focus too much on that, if you stimulate yourself too much, if you think about sex visually, think of erotic thoughts and images too much, that will put you over to the 10 on the tension scale, right? So maybe the most accurate definition of this would be the arousal tension scale, because you can hold a little bit of this tension building up, but once it reaches a certain point, it starts to make you contract, and that's when we get into trouble. And usually that is around a 7 or an 8 for men. Sometimes it's lower than that. So when you remain at a 7, you can focus on expanding your pleasure to higher and higher states. How do you do this? I've covered this in depth in many of my other videos, but I'm going to give a quick review here of some things you can use to keep your sexual excitement and pleasure high while keeping your physical tension in your body low. Number 1 is relaxation. Again, as you start to tense up any area of your body, it often causes tension in your pelvic floor as well. And you start building up into that 10 where you ejaculate. Deep belly breathing will help keep you calm and stable. And there's also the sexual kung fu techniques for drawing the sexual energy upwards in the body, which disperses that tension from the genitals and allows that sexual energy to penetrate the rest of the body. This is the big problem for men as well, is they can only handle so much of a sexual energy charge in their body before they have to ejaculate, because there's nowhere else for that to go. So all the tension builds up here, and it builds up very quickly. When you can disperse it through your entire body by circulating the sexual energy, then you're able to stay at a 7, even though the sexual energy is building and building and building throughout your entire body. Feeling your body, this is huge. Most men, when they're masturbating especially, are so fixated on visual images and fantasy that this is creating more tension in their body. I made a whole video about this. But basically, when you're focusing on sexual images, it creates more of this tension response in your body. So by bringing your awareness instead to simply feeling your body, using your mind to release tension as it arises, you'll be in more of a feeling state and less of a projecting, thinking state, which tends to build more tension in your mind and body as these are connected. And you'll be more receptive into what you're feeling. And by feeling it, by observing it, you will start to amplify it without increasing tension. You're staying relaxed. So again, this really clears up the misunderstanding that you have to be right at like a 9.8 or a 9.9 to have a non-ejaculatory orgasm. That is definitely not true. Maybe yes, if you're trying to have the genital-centered orgasm, which is basically a weak ejaculatory orgasm without the ejaculation, but that's not what I'm talking about here. And I don't recommend wasting your time chasing that type of orgasm. It doesn't lead very far. With this, you can ride those waves, focusing on staying relaxed and not building up too much tension in your body, keeping your mind relaxed as well, so that you can let the pleasure build and build and build into these altered states of powerful orgasmic experience. And that's another important thing, is rather than thinking about the orgasm as like an event, that's what the peak orgasm is. It's a very limited event with a sharp beginning, a very short middle, and a sharp downward curve. It's there, it's intense, and then it's done. You're tired, you have to recover. This is not the case with this type of orgasm. We'll call this the Valley Orgasm, right? Because we're just sustaining this state of full body energy. It's something that builds a little more slowly, right? You can't really rush into this. So slowing your build on what we would originally call the arousal scale, right? Not getting too stimulated too quickly is a major key, because you want to keep your mind and body relaxed throughout the process. So you're slowly building this state, and the more present you are with it, the more intense it becomes. And this does not work when you're in a goal-oriented state. When you're trying to reach it, when you're trying to get somewhere, you're in the future. You're outside of the now, you're outside of your body, and you're projecting outwards. You will not experience this type of orgasm when you're outside of the present moment. So just to sum things up, you want to build your arousal tension response slowly. Don't get too stimulated too quickly. Take some time with it. Keep breathing deeply, stay relaxed, and stay about a 7 of the way towards an ejaculatory orgasm. You want to stay right there. If your arousal starts building more and more than that, you usually notice your pelvic floor starts to squeeze. That's when you know you're going a bit too far. You want to relax. Stop stimulating for a moment, take a couple deep breaths, and then continue. And so you focus on keeping your arousal tension level around a 7 while increasing the pleasure in your body by focusing on it, by relaxing more and more and allowing it to spread through your body. And this is really going against a lot of your old programming. Your old programming is to tense up, to stimulate yourself harder into an ejaculatory orgasm. That does not work here. So you really have to change your approach with this. So I've given you a lot. This is all just, of course, right now it's just theoretical information. You really have to practice to start feeling this stuff. Check out my non-ejaculatory orgasm playlist for a lot of exercises on really experiencing this. And if you want the most direct, in-depth training with all of this, how to have non-ejaculatory orgasms, how to circulate your sexual energy, overcome premature ejaculation, and last for hours in bed, check out my 12-week course, Multi-Orgasmic Man. There'll be more information in the description of this video. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel, give this video a like, and leave a comment below. Have a great day, my friends.